Hey, Friday Night Flood fam, it's Sarah, and welcome back to week two. Nope, two. So glad that you're here. Last week, if you missed it, we started talking a little bit about isolation. And isolation just kind of means separating yourself, being separated from other people. Through the last 6 months or so of 2020, a lot of us have been a little bit isolated, right? With having to quarantine, and that's been hard for us for a lot of different reasons. But we talked last week about how God did not create us to do life alone. It's obvious that people were made for relationships. Actually, these days, scientists are telling us more and more that one of the biggest causes of suicide, depression, anxiety in America is lack of meaningful connection with other people. That's crazy, right? It's obvious that we were made for relationships. And this is why Friday Night Flood is so important to us, and you're so important to us. We want you to have meaningful connections with real people who really care about you. We believe that's how we can fight back against the epidemic of depression and suicide. We were created for real face-to-face relationships with real people. And when we try to do away with that connection, I mean, it's obvious what happened. There are a bunch of reasons why we get stuck in isolation or being separated from people. Last week we talked about quarantine. Some of you guys talked about having social anxiety or being introverted in your small groups. Sometimes we think, there are days where people are just way too people-y, and I would just rather be by myself, if you know what I mean. It's much easier to be by myself. I'd much rather just talk to people online today. And sometimes we choose isolation that way. But sometimes we choose isolation. Another reason that we choose to be alone sometimes is when we've done something that we regret. When we've done something wrong. I don't know if you've ever been there, but when we've done something wrong, we can be filled with a special kind of shame and guilt and regret, and something about us doesn't want that to be brought into our relationships. We don't want it to be a burden to other people. We don't want other people to see us that way. We don't want people to know what we've done wrong. And so what we do is when we've done something wrong, we tend to pull away and isolate ourselves from other people. We actually see this in the very first story of the Bible, where God created Adam, and we talked about last week, God was like, wow, it is not good for this guy to be alone. Like, I should make someone else for him. And so he starts making animals, and he's like, no, these guys won't cut it. And so he creates woman, Eve, and he says everything was good. Everything was amazing until they decided to deliberately disobey God, which, we call sin, right? Which is a big churchy, scary word for just missing the mark or doing something that God has told us isn't really in line with the way that the world is supposed to work. And so immediately when Adam and Eve sin, they're filled with this guilt and shame, and they do something really strange. They decide they're going to hide from God. Now, I'm not a professional hide and seek player, but I even know that if I'm playing hide and seek with God, I'm probably not going to win, right? God is everywhere. He sees everything. I'm gonna lose. He knows everything. He knows where we are all the time. But for some reason, their gut reaction, Adam and Eve, after they do something wrong, is to hide. They decide they're going to hide from God, even though they knew it wouldn't solve anything. They knew that God would find them. And in the same way today, I've been there. Some reason, I don't know why, our gut reaction when we mess up as human beings, sometimes we just feel like we have to hide. We feel like we have to pull away from people. We feel like we have to isolate ourselves. But the problem is that we weren't created to be isolated. We were created to do life with other people. So what do we do when we mess up? What the Bible teaches us is that Even as much as we want to get away from people, as much as we want to hide, as much as we want to pull away and isolate ourselves when we do something wrong, if you hear one thing, hear me say this today. You don't have to hide. You don't have to hide when you mess up. Actually, the Bible tells us that when we do something wrong, when we sin, the best thing that we can do is bring it to someone else. Bring it to other people. Bring it to God. The best thing that we can do is confess it, talk about it, and bring it into the light. That's kind of crazy and scary though, right? Because nobody likes to talk about the things they've done wrong. Nobody wants to talk about sin. It doesn't feel good to talk about the things that I've done wrong. But God promises us that something will happen when we talk about our sin. Like he promises that there's this weight. You probably felt that weight before of guilt and shame and I know I did this thing wrong. God promises that when we talk about it, when we bring it into the light, that weight lifts off of us. When we do something wrong, just because of how God built the universe, like when we do something wrong, there's always a consequence. And usually the big consequence of doing something wrong is how we feel afterward. We feel like garbage. The guilt and the shame, they weigh on us, and those things are heavy. I know this is a pretty serious talk that we're having here, but I love SpongeBob, the TV show, SpongeBob SquarePants. I grew up watching it. I'm sorry if you didn't grow up watching it or if you hate it. Really sorry, but like pretty much I've seen every episode of SpongeBob, and everything like reminds me of a SpongeBob episode, and so that's definitely happening right now. And so there's a really early season 1 episode of SpongeBob where we're introduced to SpongeBob's boating school. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but SpongeBob has boating school, and it's like driver's ed, and he's really bad at driving. So he's taken this boating test like 12 times. He's failed it every time. His driving teacher, Mrs. Puff, is just like so done with him. And so he has this idea though. Well, Patrick has this idea. Patrick is SpongeBob's best friend. He has this idea one day that, you know, before he goes to take his driver's test, Patrick says, you know what, we should put a walkie-talkie in your sponge head, and I will talk to you during your driver's test, and I will give you all the answers. I'll tell you what to do. I'll tell you where to turn and when to gas and when to brake and all this stuff. And SpongeBob's like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. And so he goes to take his boating exam, and he's flying through it, you know, he's doing great, and Mrs. Puff is like, what's going on? She's pleasantly surprised at her star pupil, SpongeBob. And then something happens, and, you know, Mrs. Puff says something, and SpongeBob all of a sudden realizes that he's cheating. Like, he's done something really wrong, and he just loses it. I'll just let you watch it.
There's the finish line. It's unbelievable. You've shown the most spectacular improvement of any student I've ever seen. What's your secret? A little radio in your head? Oh, and under that hat is some kind of antenna? And some guy miles away from here is giving you all the answers. Oh, yes, but that would be cheating.
Cheating! I'm cheating, Mrs. Puff.
Yes, my star pupil.
I think I'm cheating.
What's that, dear?
I think I am cheating.
You've let go of the wheel.
I do have an antenna under my hat. There is a guy giving me all the answers. It's all true. I'm cheating. I'm cheating. I'm cheating.
What?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Puff. I'm sorry.
The wheel, SpongeBob. The wheel.
Cheating. I'm a cheater. Cheater.
No. It's quite all right. You can cheat.
No, I'm cheating.
So SpongeBob realizes that he's majorly messed up right now, right? Like he's done something very wrong. And he knew immediately that he had to get it out. Like he had to tell her. He had to get that weight off of him. And of course, he's so distracted then by that weight that he proceeds to destroy everything in his path. But he had to confess what he did wrong. Now, SpongeBob is an exceptionally good dude. Like he's got a really strong moral compass. Our gut reaction often is not I have to tell someone, but it's, wow, I have to hide. I have to hide what I've done. But God tells us actually that we don't have to hide. We don't have to be afraid to bring our sin to him or to anyone else. Psalm 32 has a lot of good stuff to say about this. King David wrote this psalm a long time ago, and he wrote this psalm about what it's like to confess what we've done wrong. And this is what it says. Oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in complete honesty. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away and I groaned all day long. Day and night, your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. Finally, I confessed all my sins to you and I stopped trying to hide my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. King David wrote this poem to God a long time ago, but I think there's so much that we can learn from it today. When we try to hide our sin and push it all down inside, we feel it. Like we feel that weight. Nothing good grows in the darkness. Just to name a few things, mold, fungi, moss, like those by definition are things that prey on and do damage to healthy, good, growing, living things. Nothing beautiful or delightful grows in the dark. Sin hides in the dark too, that's where it grows. But when we confess our sin and bring it into the light, when we talk about what we've done wrong, when we confess, that's where we can actually find healing. Let the light shine into us and heal us. Talking about things that we've done wrong, I've said this before, is kind of like throwing up. Like it really doesn't feel great at the time, but why do we throw up? Because our body senses something not good in us, a bacteria or spoiled food, and it's like, nope, you got to get out now, right? And so we throw up, and it feels a lot better afterward, right? Because we've gotten rid of that thing that was causing us so much whatever this is. And it's the same way with confessing our sin, getting it out. It weighs on us and it's heavy and it doesn't feel good. We weren't meant to carry that weight around. But when we get it out and we talk about it, we bring it into the light, those burdens are lifted off of us. It feels so much better. Look, God isn't afraid of what you've done wrong today, okay? He sees everything. He knows everything in your heart. He knows everything that you've done, and he still loves you. He still chooses you. And also, he's not mad at you. Sometimes we think of God that way, like he's just always angry because we do things wrong, but this psalm teaches us, Psalm 32 teaches us that when we come to God honestly and openly and we ask him to forgive us for the things that we've done wrong, he will forgive us. You don't have to be scared to talk about what you've done. You don't have to isolate yourself and pull away from people. We were created to do life with people in the light. God is full of compassion and kindness. He's slow to anger. He's quick to forgive. I love those things about him. You don't have to be afraid. So let's talk to God right now in prayer. God, I thank you so much that you're here with us right now. I thank you that we don't have to be afraid to talk about the things that we've done wrong. God, I thank you that you are all those things. You're slow to anger. You're quick to forgive. You're kind. You're loving. God, you're not mad at us today. Like, God, you just see us and you care about us and you see us with our burdens and our guilt and our shame that we're trying to hold on to. And I pray, God, that we would know today that we don't have to live with all that weight on our shoulders, that we can get it off, that we can give these things to you, and that we can be promised and assured that when we come to you with these things, God, that you will forgive us. That's who you are. That's why you sent your son, Jesus. God, thank you that you've shown us another way to live through your son, Jesus. God, through everything that he taught. God, thank you that we don't have to live with these burdens. We don't have to live with guilt and shame and the weight of everything that we've done wrong. But you sent your son, Jesus, to take what we deserve, God, so that we can live free lives. I pray today that we would just come to you openly and honestly, and that we would not be afraid to give you what we have. God, thank you for who you are. Thank you that you're a forgiving God. We worship you today. We just say thank you. We love you, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.